Hello, my name is Giselle, and today I'm going to be giving a short presentation on Native American burial rituals. This presentation was made with the help of Miss Hannah Douglas, who is an amazing partner, and I am going to be presenting it. Long before America was discovered, this land was inhabited by Native Americans. With that being said, Native Americans were one of the first ones to perform any sort of funeral rituals. After being discovered, the Native Americans had so much taken away from them. Although they were stripped from about everything, they still continued to keep their traditions alive by passing those traditions on to their children. Some of those traditions were their funeral rituals. Recently, there has been an increase in people wanting to know more about Native Americans. One of them being that they want to be more politically correct toward indigenous people and their cultures. The funeral customs of Native Americans, or preferably indigenous people, involve the community and activities to honor the deceased and support the family. There are 564 tribes in America, with approximately 1.9 million people. Each tribe has their own variation on funeral customs, each including the use of native languages, symbols, ceremonial objects, and practices. The indigenous people consider the natural world as a sacred place, with religious activities attached to this specific places. Many also believe that birth, life, and death are all part of the endless cycle. In a traditional Native American funeral, the family takes care of their own. They make all their arrangements, including transporting of the body, and utilize green burial techniques. Family members wash and dress the body and place it in a shroud or wooden casket. While the body may be honored with 2 to 4 days before burial, embalming is usually avoided. With modern technology, the body is preserved prior to burial with refrigeration using dry ice. As I said earlier, there are 564 tribes. For this presentation, we chose to talk about 2. The first tribe being the Aleut Native Americans. The Aleut Native Americans are based out of the Aleutian Islands between Alaska and Russia. They now reside in Alaska. Unfortunately, the Aleuts are a dying tribe with only 11,000 full-blooded Aleuts. Aleut funeral rituals before the 18th century. Typically, when one of the Aleuts would pass, the body was kept on a frame covered in skins. It was then kept in the spot where they died for 15 days. The family mourned and chanted during those days, and on the 16th day, the body was then embalmed and buried. On the Aleutian Islands, the ancestors were buried close to the villages. There were traditionally 4 main types of burials: umkans, caves, community houses, and sacrifices. The most common of the 4 was the umkans, which were the rock burial mounds or markers that were placed at the edge of the cliff. And here's an example of one of the umkan burials. The second tribe was the Apache Indians. Unfortunately, the Apache Indians are another dying tribe. In 1940, there were only on record 35 Apaches in the state of Oklahoma. In 1970, there were only about 1,500 in New Mexico. In 1902, the deceased Apache would be buried and clothed in the best the family could afford, or the best that the camp was able to furnish. They wrapped the deceased in a blanket and carried the body to the hill, where it was either thrown into a crevice in the rocks or placed in a shallow grave. Ashes and pollen were then sprinkled in a circle around the grave, beginning at its southwest corner. This act was performed and considered to be a prayer so that the soul would safely enter Oso, or heaven. The grave was filled with stone and dirt. When an infant would die, it was tied to its cradle and hung up in a tree with a pail of water hung next to it. This was performed so that the baby could drink at will. They mourned for a month. At morning, noon, and dusk they chanted. This next part of the presentation is about the chief leader, Sitting Bull, and his crazy burial story. Sitting Bull was a member of the Midnight Strong Heart Society, which was made of elite warriors who demonstrated their bravery by working against their enemies. Sitting Bull was one of 2 sash wearers, and not long after that he became the leader. In 1890, Sitting Bull was met with 40 men outside his cabin for questioning. He was escorted out with his family behind, Nearby relatives gathered around, and not long after that some commotion arose. Gunfire then happened, and after it went silent, Sitting Bull was then found dead there on the floor with a gunshot wound to the chest. Sitting Bull was buried there in Fort Yates Military Cemetery. The officials poured quicklime in his casket to help ensure mortification. In 1953, a decedent exhumed Sitting Bull and took him to South Dakota to bury him in their memorial for the Indian leader. His remains were once again placed in the earth, but this time in a modern casket surrounded by 20 feet of concrete to protect the burial so no one would ever dig him up again. Before ending this presentation, I wanted to give and show a quick photo of Sitting Bull, the chief leader. Typically, traditional Indian burials take significantly more time than a typical American funeral. These families don't like to rush the process, which that can take up to several days to complete. Autopsies are typically frowned upon in most occasions because Native Americans tend to discourage any contact with the deceased. Many believe that the spirit will leave the body through these rituals and ceremonies where the family and tribe members must help it on its way. If the body is cut open in an autopsy, they believe that the spirit may not properly begin its journey after death. In the Navajo tribe, they believe the spirit will come back if the body is not buried correctly. They don't necessarily fear the return of the spirit for their own safety, but more because they want the spirit to go on. Due to this belief, the Navajo value dying outside of the home so the spirit can linger in the home. Once a person dies in the Navajo tribe, the body must go through a traditional cleansing ritual as soon as possible. This usually begins with 2 nude men covered in ash cleanse the body. Afterward, 3 family members then wrap the body, load it onto a new horse, and lead it as far as north of the town. These then family members then bury the body and conceal the grave. The horse that was used is killed and buried too so it can help the spirit move on. While modern Native American death rituals today may look very different from those practiced hundreds of years ago, there are often some elements that are still used and believed and included in their practices today. Many of these rituals and beliefs aren't typically well documented and are considered sacred, so they remain shrouded in mystery to continue as Native Americans continue to honor their dead. Well, that is the end of this presentation. I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to watch this, and I also want to thank my partner Hannah for making all of this really easy, and she's an amazing partner. Thank you.